This is what the Lord showed me. The Lord was standing beside a wall built with a plumb line, and with a plumb line in his hand. And the Lord said to me, Amos, what do you see? And I said, a plumb line. Then the Lord said, See, I am setting a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel. Here ends the lesson. The second lesson appointed for this day is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6, verses 14 through 44. King Herod heard of Jesus, for Jesus' name had become known. Some were saying, John the Baptizer has been raised from the dead, and for this reason these powers are at work in him. But others said, it is Elijah, and others, it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. For Herod himself had sent men who arrested John, bound him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because Herod had married her. For John had been telling Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And Herodias had a grudge against John and wanted to kill him, but she could not. For Herod feared John, knowing that John was a righteous and holy man, and Herod protected him. When Herod heard John, he was greatly perplexed, and yet he liked to listen to him. But an opportunity came when Herod, on his birthday, gave a banquet for his courtiers and officers, and for the leaders of Galilee. When his daughter Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, Ask me for whatever you wish, and I will give it. And he solemnly swore to her, Whatever you ask, I will give you, even half my kingdom. She went out and said to her mother, What should I ask for? Her mother replied, The head of John the Baptizer. Immediately, the girl rushed back to the king and requested, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. The king was deeply grieved, yet out of regard for his oaths and for the guests, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately the king sent a soldier of the guard with orders to bring John's head. He went and beheaded him in prison, brought his head on a platter, and gave it to the girl. Then the girl gave it to her mother. When John's disciples heard about it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. Jesus said to them, Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while. for many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in a boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now, many saw the disciples going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived there ahead of the disciples. As Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away, so that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." The disciples said to Jesus, "Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves have you? Go and see." When they had found out, they said, 5, and 2 fish. Then he ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and of 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, Jesus looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before the people, and he divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000. Here ends the lesson.
Dear friends, on this day that is not even 18 hours after an assassination attempt on former President Trump, we need to be very clear about what the plumb line is in our lives. When do we speak up and deplore violence, and when do we say nothing or even engage in it? Please pray with me. O God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Our first lesson was from the prophet Amos, and he uses that image of a plumb line. And if you don't know or have to be reminded, as I did, it's a string that hangs down with a weight at the bottom. And the usefulness of this is it makes sure that everything is plumb. Everything is lined up. It's been a tool still used today and had been known for many centuries before Jesus referenced it, before Amos referenced it. So let's think about that, a plumb line. The plumb line makes sure that everything is aligned. We have to have the one wall come down to the ceiling in a perfect perpendicular, right? And then do we have to have the ceiling at the floor and the ceiling up on top? We have to make sure that the walls are square on other sides. It's alignment. And if they aren't aligned, then the building is much weaker. To be as strong and lasting as possible, we, like the walls, need to be aligned. What we say and what we do need to be the same as what we profess our plumb line to be. And I posit that it should be compassion. I was chagrined to read about yesterday's awful killing of one person, serious wounding of others, and the near assassination of our former president. I was also sad to hear that President Biden had said just shortly before, we need to put Trump in a bullseye. We know, I presume, what he meant. he meant stop focusing on me and my age and focus on this other candidate and what he stands for. But that's not what he said. He said we need to put President Trump in a bullseye. He could have said, let's focus on Trump. Let's spotlight Trump. But he used a violent gun metaphor. My friends, at this time, our words matter. All of us, our words matter. I want to share with you some of the data that I learned last night also. Robert Pape, a political scientist at the University of Chicago, has studied American attitudes about political violence since January 6, 2020.